Topic number 2, what it do? Wow, no more undefeated teams in the NFL right now. As we all know, the Eagles and the 49ers lost. So the question that we have right now, did both the 49ers and the Eagles get exposed? Or was it just a bad day at the office, Zach?
Yeah, I think this is a really good question because when you think about the NFL this past Sunday, kind of what I referenced to start the show is I don't think anyone was expecting for one of these teams, let alone both of these teams, to lose on Sunday, but they both lose their first game of the season on the same day. And I think it's so interesting with the 49ers, especially, and rightfully so. They were kind of crowned after that Sunday night game against Dallas, just a dominant effort. That game seemed like it was over before it even started. And then the next week, they're out here losing not only to the Browns, but the former AAF quarterback PJ Walker led Cleveland Browns. That is just a result not a lot of people saw coming. But I would say it was a bad day at the office for both sides. But at the same time, there are lessons to be learned from both games in both teams' cases. And if they don't learn from that, it could cost them down the line going forward. And I'll explain what I mean, right? First of all, with San Francisco, they were dealt a little bit of a bad hand, right? McCaffrey goes down earlier in the game. Deebo Samuel goes down early in the game. And it was very clear very early on that Brock Purdy, a guy that we were talking about last week, him being in the MVP conversation, he played his worst game as a starter in San Francisco. And it's fine, right? Cleveland's defense is really good. It was bad weather. He's been so good throughout the first 10 or so games of his career, especially for a guy that was drafted with the last pick in the draft. He has been playing great up to this point, but he really struggled in that game on Sunday. And that was until the final drive, though. And he did do enough to get the 49ers into field goal range to end the game. And unfortunately, their rookie kicker missed the kick. But there's been a lot of talk. There's been a lot of conversation about Kyle Shanahan and some of his shortcomings, some of his mistakes in the biggest games when it comes to the clock, when it comes to his play calling. And the thing that really stood out to me in that game was that without McCaffrey, especially, the 49ers, they had a really tough time getting their running game going, and that kind of forced Purdy a little bit into some throws, into some plays that he just wasn't really capable of making. And when you slow down that 49er running game, I feel like that's when you could go and get them like Cleveland did, especially without Deebo and McCaffrey. That's obviously a huge factor, but it just felt to me like Kyle Shanahan was running these play action passes like every play, and Jim Schwartz was telling his defense, like, don't bite, just keep your eye on the ball. And they were able to do that. And this San Francisco offense was really frustrated up until that final drive. So I just wonder, in the biggest game, in the biggest moments, does Kyle Shanahan, did he learn his lessons from past shortcomings, and is he able to execute, especially if that running game doesn't get going? And with Philadelphia, it's interesting, right? Because Jalen Hurts, that throw on 3rd and 9 was inexcusable, especially for a guy kind of like Justin Herbert that's making as much money as he is, a guy that's supposed to be considered a no doubt elite quarterback. And with Philly, it's interesting too. I feel like they've already been through more adversity this year opposed to any time last year. It was almost uncanny to me how smooth and free-flowing last season was for them on their road to the Super Bowl, but already this season they faced some adversity, and they made a bunch of mistakes in that game on Sunday that cost them as well. Devontae Smith had a really bad drop. Hurts, he had 3 interceptions, but really only one of them you could blame on him. Another one, his arm got hit during the throw. The other one was off of Goddard. He just dropped it. So he made that mistake on 3rd and 9. But mainly, Nick Sirianni, and I understand the Jets were missing Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed. They had a super banged-up secondary. But I just felt like the Eagles threw the ball way too many times. There was a huge differential. It was 58-24, I believe, in terms of their pass-to-run plays. And especially when you had a lead on Zach Wilson, who, to his credit, he didn't turn the ball over. That's an improvement to some of the games he's been playing in the past. But the Jets didn't score a touchdown until the Eagles basically let Breece Hall score in the last minute of that game after the interception. So the Jets offense really couldn't get anything going. And I just felt like Sirianni, if he would have been a little bit more conservative, if he would have just focused a little bit more on controlling the ball, the Eagles probably would have got out of MetLife with a victory. So it's a bad Sunday. Every team has now lost at least one game in the NFL. I think you could chalk this day as just a bad day in the office for both teams. But at the same time, if they don't learn from their mistakes, if they're not careful going forward, it could definitely cost them again.
I think both teams got exposed on Sunday.
Wow.
In these regards. Now, when we talk about the word exposed, We talking about issues that we picked up on. You know, film. It's almost like me being a boxing fan and a fighter says, I saw something on film that I could exploit when I fight this cat. But we all know everybody got a plan until they get punched in the mouth, according to Mike Tyson, right? What I mean by they got exposed was I saw a few things on film where I'm like, a team could exploit that, but it's execution that's going to be the main thing. Now, that's not me saying that the Eagles and the 49ers are not going to be the two teams left standing in the NFC, right? But I think it's a golden opportunity for the Detroit Lions to think bigger picture here and not just, okay, wow, we finally won NFC, North title. No, you should be thinking bigger than that, because what I saw is something that y'all could exploit, and I'm going to break it down right now. Let's start off with the 49ers, shall we? You see, when we talk about football, right, and we talk about credit, I call it the credit pie, right, where everybody gets credit, the quarterback, the coach, the wide receivers and all that. Rarely do we ever talk about the importance of coordinators, right? We don't talk about that. When you think about the Browns, right, Jim Schwartz has proven to be the hire of the coaching cycle, whether it was a coordinator, head coach, in general. He was the best hire. And we see how that can have a profound impact on your team. The same unit last year, right? They didn't make a lot of, additions. They added some. Zadarius Smith being one of those guys headlined with some of the moves they made. But for the most part, a similar unit to last year all of a sudden became one of the best defenses of all time overnight. That's what a coaching hire can do. Scheme. I could be able to put Myles Garrett in different positions, like linebacker, and have him being able to get free downhill to get to the quarterback, right? When we talk about coaching hires and coordinators, let's talk about DeMeco Ryans and that loss right there with the 49ers. Because last year, they were only giving up, I believe, 3.8 yards per carry. This year, they're giving up 4.0 yards per carry. 160 yards was given on the ground against the Browns. That wasn't happening last year, okay? That shows the importance of DeMeco Ryans and what he brought to that team, because we already know what he's bringing on the Texans right now. They lost that. That was a big loss. Another thing, too, their special teams was exposed. So we're not worried about their special teams after Sunday when this guy just literally missed the chip shot. We're not worried about that. Yeah, special teams.
Make that kick? I think he might.
Look, man, they need to make that kick. They very well need to make that kick. Special teams is an issue. They got to worry about that. Special teams is a part of the game, right? And Brock Purdy was exposed outside structure where, okay, things are going down. Guys are getting hurt. Can you be that MVP that people was debating in my comments about because they ain't like my take calling him a system quarterback? Well, damn sure. How about it, right? He got exposed as well as everything needs to go right for this guy to function. And not everything is going to go right. Another thing, too, that got exposed from the 49ers perspective was a reality check that, these guys got to be healthy. In the last couple years with the 49ers, they've been dropping like flies at the worst possible time on top of that. So I'm pretty sure they don't need me to remind them about that. But those are the reality checks and the things that got exposed for me was those things. How they run defense is not as good as it used to be, and how teams could run on this unit, as we saw with the Browns with Kareem Hunt and Ford, who is not the best running backs in the league, by the way. They're not. So that's a question right there. With the Eagles losing Shane Steichen, that was a big loss too. The Eagles don't have an offensive identity. Jalen Hurts has thrown 7 interceptions in 6 games, more interceptions than he threw last year. That's telling me that he is playing hero ball. He's asked to do a little bit more than just hand the ball off and throw the ball to the playmakers and use his profound athletic ability. He's asked to do more with his arm. And that's leading with more interceptions. My guy about to top Dak Prescott on this pace. And he might reach Jameis Winston on this pace. So, yeah, you have to feel, I won't say concerned, but they did get exposed. They could be beat. I mean, when you're losing to a third-string quarterback XFL, that's not a great football team. I don't care what nobody say. I don't care how historic the Browns defense is. You cannot call yourself a great football team and lose to a third-stringer. You can't. So, yeah, was it a bad day at the office? Clearly. But I think they got exposed as well.
To the Eagles, I wanted to zone in on a point you made. It feels to me a lot of times with that offense, it's just Jalen, go make a play, go do your thing, and bail us out. And as much as I love Jalen Hurts, it gets to a point where that's not sustainable, like with any quarterback in the NFL. And if you're going to keep doing that, he is probably going to keep on making mistakes. And to me, like, yeah, the Shane Steichen loss, I definitely think that was one of the more under talked about storylines of the offseason. And I know it's hard because we don't have any evidence, right? Like we could think like, oh, a team is going to miss this coordinator. That coordinator was a great hire for this team. But until we see the games and until we see the impact that those guys are making, it's very hard to justify and kind of figure those things out. But I have a lot of doubts and a lot of hesitations about Nick Sirianni in a big game. And even Kyle Shanahan, like as great of a coach as he is, we know his track record. I didn't think he called a particularly great game on Sunday, especially towards the end against Cleveland. But one last question I wanted to ask you, though, in terms of Detroit, you brought them up too, and this being a huge opportunity for them. So you look at these three teams right now, and all three of them are tied at 5-1 in first place in the NFC right now. Like, do you see that one seed in the NFC being a realistic option for the Lions? And the reason why I think it might be is because you always say, man, like the schedule, we could never underestimate how important the schedule is in the NFL. And Philly and San Francisco, of course, like both those teams were first place teams last year. The Eagles, they have a gauntlet coming up. I mean, they host the Dolphins on Sunday night. That's going to be a huge game. They still have the Cowboys twice. They still have to go to Kansas City. They still have to host Buffalo. San Francisco comes to town. They still have to go to Seattle. Like the Eagles' schedule is a gauntlet. San Francisco, they still have to play Seattle twice as well. They still have a gauntlet of a schedule. And the thing about Detroit is like we know in that dome, that offense, it's going to get rolling against anyone. It doesn't matter who it is. Like no matter who they play, if that game's in Detroit, they're going to have a chance to win. And looking at the Lions schedule right now, they have a couple tough games here and there. They go to Baltimore this weekend. I think that's going to be a fascinating test. They still have to go to the Chargers. They still have to go to Dallas. But besides that, this Lions schedule is very manageable. And I'm starting to think the one seed could be a realistic option for them, as crazy as that might sound.
It is realistic. And that's why I think the Lions should be thinking bigger picture than just, winning a division that they're probably going to win before Thanksgiving. And they have to be thinking bigger picture. And now, obviously, you don't overlook your opponents. I don't mean overlook the guys on your schedule. You'll be a fool to do that. Clearly, we'll be talking about right now with teams that we thought should have won or was going to win. When we look at the paper, the NFL has more parity. We'll talk about that in a few minutes, with our next topic. But yes, I do believe it's very realistic. And I think they have a realistic shot to, as crazy as it might sound here, we talking about the Lions here, it's very crazy. They actually could get to an NFC Championship game, if not further. And the reason why I bring that up is because of what I talked about, how I saw the Eagles and the 49ers not look so unbeatable. That's the thing. When you talk about getting exposed, I'm finding holes where you're not unbeatable. And when you talk about the Lions, the thing I like about them is that they can go tit for tat in the trenches with these two teams, right? Their offensive line is one of the best in the league. Their defensive line is scrappy, right? We know that their offense is going to get even more dynamic because as they incorporate Jameson Williams and Jahmyr Gibbs more, we talking about explosive elements to this team. We know and we saw it with the touchdown play with Jameson Williams, how he can get behind the defense with his speed. He has that home run speed to accommodate a guy like Amon-Ra, who's able to work on them underneath routes and find the soft, spots in the zone coverage. You talk about that, and then you talk about the expansion of Jahmyr Gibbs' role, which is going to have to be expanded with the loss of David Montgomery for a couple weeks. We're talking about a more explosive offense that can and should get better. And if the Jets with no shade, okay, it's not the shade room. This is 99 pod. But if Zach Wilson, if they can win and keep the game tight and Zach Wilson can win that game, then I'm pretty sure Jared Goff can win that game because he is a more solidified quarterback and he has been playing well this year. This is the best Jared Goff I've seen in his entire career. And I'm talking about from the eye test. I'm not talking about all them weapons that he had with the Rams and he went to a Super Bowl. I'm talking about with my own two eyes. I feel comfortable with that guy going in hostile situations or whether it's at home, winning big games. And that's why I think the Lions, based on the 49ers and Eagles getting exposed, they should be thinking bigger picture here.
It almost felt like to me in that Eagle game, it's hard for me to just completely bury Hurts because I feel like if he wasn't out there, the Jets would have won this game by 4 touchdowns and the Eagles would have never had a chance to begin with. But he was doing plays, especially within the first 3 quarters of that game. He was just making plays to literally keep the Eagles in the game. He had that 1 touchdown on their first drive, that QB sneak where he was originally, we thought he was down, but he finds a way to extend the ball into the end zone. He's literally stiff-arming defenders and dropping dimes like on the run. He played, I thought, pretty well in the first 3 quarters, but that one mistake really ended up costing Philly. And I'm telling you, man, like Nick Sirianni in a big game really scares me. I feel like Robert Saleh outcoached him. Like I really felt like Robert Saleh got the best out of him. And we know what the deal is with Kyle Shanahan. And also the Lions, like they've been very good on the road. I believe they're 7
undefeated this year,
dating back to last year. So yeah, that's going to be a fascinating watch. And man, this Sunday, Lions at Ravens doesn't get much better than that. I'm excited for that one.
Absolutely. And pretty much, man, in closing, you know, obviously the Eagles, if there's a team how can I say it? If there's a team out of these two to be a little bit more concerned with going forward, the Eagles, you have to be concerned because their schedule is going to get tougher, at least with, the 49ers. I believe they play next week. I know it's not the Bengals. That's coming up in 2 weeks. But
yeah,
they play
the Vikings. But it's
the Vikings. They should win that game.
It is on Monday Night Football. So it's
I thought the 49ers should have won that game against the Browns. I guess you don't know it till it happens, right? Till it's done. But with the Eagles, you have a big game on Sunday Night Football that I'm picking the Eagles to lose. I like the Dolphins to win that game. Why? Because they are more well-balanced. They can run the football. A lot of people talk about this passing attack with Tua and Tyreek Hill. Forget about that for a second. They can run the rock. They can run with Raheem Mostert. They can run with A-Chain, who's not going to play because he's on IR. But they can run with, the other guys that got in there that they sub in there. There's so many guys that they have. It's like they rotate running backs, and these guys, Jeff Wilson coming back, whatever. I don't care. There's another guy, Ackman or Ahmed. He could come in there. Listen, they could run the rock. So I do believe that the Eagles are in trouble. I think they're going to drop a second straight game, and we are going to be looking at them not the same. And listen, one more point about Jalen Hurts. I'm not saying he's a bad quarterback. I don't think he is. I think he's a good quarterback. But we see, him being thrusted in a situation where he's being required to do more. Last year, it's no shade. It's not the shade room here. It's a 99 pod. But my guy had it all last year. He had the best roster in football, top to bottom. Okay? He did not have to go out there and win games. And they played their strengths. And they mastered this RPO game, this 4th and 1, tush push, booty push, whatever that joint is. I don't care. Brotherly love push, whatever. And they was blowing out teams. There was no adversity last year. The only adversity this team faced was in the Super Bowl. Okay? Think about that last year. They faced no adversity. The only adversity this team faced was in the Super Bowl. This year is totally different. You lose your coordinators. Your offense is not as explosive. You're throwing more interceptions now. We are going to see the real Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles going forward.
Please like and subscribe for all the up-to-date content. We've been slinging shows left and right, slinging content left and right. Please don't miss anything. If you do, like, subscribe, leave a comment, or leave a question, something you may want to answer, something you may have. All ideas are great ideas. Nothing's a dumb question.